This meeting has been held remotely and also in person. It will be filmed and recorded for live and subsequent broadcasts available through the Council's website. The Council is a data controller under the General Data Protection Regulations, the Data Protection Act 2018. We broadcast and record Council meetings to fulfil our public trust obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected during the process will be retained in accordance with the Council's published policies available through the Council's website. Members of the Council are reminded that they should follow the Council's established meetings protocols, including the use of the chat facility, and that comments made in the chat facility are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who have also received invites to the meeting. So with that, thank you and welcome all along. And can I go to Diane to go to apologies and substitutions? Diane.
We have no apologies for absence. We will now move to an attendance roll call before proceeding to the declarations of interest. And the following members please indicate they're present at the meeting, either in person or remotely. Councillor Armstrong. Present in the chamber. Councillor Brennan. Present in the chamber. Councillor Clougherty.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Hellier.
Present remotely.
Councillor Maguire. Present. Councillor McVeigh.
In the chamber.
Councillor Nelson.
In the chamber.
Councillor Quinn.
Present remotely.
Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Robertson.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Wilson.
Present remotely.
Reverend Birch.
Present chamber.
Mr. Doherty.
Present chamber.
Reverend Donaldson. Ms. MacDonald.
Present remotely.
And Ms. McEwen.
Present remotely.
Are there any further declarations of interest to those intimated at the earlier communities business?
No, I can't see any. So we'll move along to agenda item number 9. It's the first agenda item for Education Committee, and that is the Education Revenue Update Report. And I'll ask you to take us through that.
Thanks, Convener. So this is the Education Revenue Budget for 25-26. The current 25-26 revenue budget is £119.095 million. And the latest projection is an overspend of 243,000 or 0.2% of the total budget. So expenditure has decreased by 145,000 since the last committee. Section 3.3 of the report lists the main variances in detail. And moving on to section 3.4 and appendix 4, that provides the details of the earmarked reserves. Expenditure is currently 67.8% of the phase spend and 57.1% of expected spend for the year. I'm requesting environment this cycle, and that's detailed in section 3.5, appendix 5. And environment is a time facilities management catering. So I'm requesting 58,000 will be moved from employee costs, and that will fund overspend in catering and cleaning materials and also disposables, as well as a shortfall in special catering income and social work income. And the environment is fully reflected in the report. So committee are asked to note projected overspend of 243,000 and also to approve the environment as detailed in 3.5, paragraph 3.5 and appendix 5. Committee are also asked to note that the expenditure has been reduced by 145,000 since the last committee. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Reynolds is having IT problems. So I hope there are plenty of questions in this item, and that will mean we can filibuster in order for Councillor Reynolds to come in. That's fine, he's going to be asking the questions. Oh, sorry, we open up the questions. I've got a question online from Councillor Wilson. David.
Thank you, Convener. I'm looking at transport costs. Big page 157. Transport costs. The approved budget was 2,391,000. It was revised by 300,000. We're then looking at a further overspend of 161. So I do note that in the projected outturn, we're hoping to reduce this to the underspend, projected to have an underspend by 49,000 due to updated costs received from SPT. But still, my argument is that we increased this budget by 300,000 and we're really not keeping to it. Is there any explanation for that?
I'll let you start and then whenever it's ready to add to it.
Through you, convener, the majority of the overspend in the transport heading relates to ASN transport rather than the SPT's mainstream contracts. It's the mainstream contracts that are now projecting to go under. So it's the ASN transport because we've increased that budget. And the latest information from SPT was that it was reduced from what it was in Q2. So this is the updated figures from provided by SPT that the projection is based on. So the budget is slightly more than we thought it was going to require, and that was based on the Q1 figures. So since Q1, SPT's had another look at it and their projected costs have come down for the ESN.
Could I have a supplementary, please, convener?
Yes, David, before you go, I'm going to bring Mary in case Mary had anything to add to that. Mary, you're on mute.
Convener.
Yeah.
Yep. No, just to add that, yes, that's the SPT side of it. It's got the underspend. There's also an overspend within internal transport within ASN, because obviously we move between contracts. Internal contract overspending, so it isn't. That's just the SPT part. Just to bear that in mind.
Right.
Thanks.
I think, convener, my supplementary might well be for Michael. We were looking at our budget at the moment for the next year. I'm not a member of the members' budget working group, but I'm sure they're having a tough time trying to get the savings. Michael, what would be the implications if we were to halve the transport budget next year?
Michael.
Well, through you, convener, I mean, I'll obviously, I'm sure you want to come in and Tony as well, but essentially halving the transport budget will put massive pressure on us being able to get young people to their provisions. I mean, obviously there's a range of, I don't know if Ruth wants to come in or Tony about proposals that are currently underway to review how we allocate, for example, ASN transport within the local authority, but halving it would put significant pressure on the system.
Just before I get Ruth to come in, I think we've got to remember as elected members, our officers will come to us each year and will come to us each year with savings options, and then savings options will include reducing transport for our primary and secondary schools, especially our secondary schools. And each year our officers come to them, us elected members, saying, our topography and our weather here, we prefer to keep the mileage as the same. I have no doubt people at the budget working group have got those options again with them this year to increase the mileage on secondary schools and our primary schools. And so far we've not done it because us elected members have shied away from that. Would that be fair?
I'll answer the question as what we have to provide. The question about half of the budget would perhaps take us to the correct conclusion, because legislatively we have to provide certain levels of transport. So if somebody of the age of 8 lives more than 3 miles from their school, we as the council have to provide transport for them to get to that school. And under the age of 8, it's 2 miles. Now, Inverclyde has an enhanced provision, but we can't shy away from what we have to provide. We also have to consider transport when we're looking at additional support needs as well. So we have to take into account the needs of the young person, and if they also require transport, that's written in the transport guidance. So I would say the question about amount is potentially too simplistic. It's what we have to provide, or what we opt to provide as additionality.
David, is that okay?
Yeah, I just look at things like projected overspend of 105,000 for internal transport drivers, a £32,000 overspend for pupil vocational transport. The budget just seems to be getting increasing and increasing, and there doesn't seem to be the control over it.
I'll bring Ruth.
That's my comment. I'll leave it at that, convener.
I'll let Ruth comment, because I think it's a fair enough challenge, David, and I'll let the corporate director answer.
So pupil consortium transport, we've always traditionally had an overspend in that. And as transport has become more expensive, that's just been exacerbated by increased costs. So we haven't seen that perhaps change. That's what we would expect to see. The internal transport drivers, if there's sickness, then we still need to get the young people to school. We can't opt to provide an alternative provision because there isn't one there. So we do have to bring in cover for that sickness. So what I would say is that everybody manages the budget as well as they possibly can. But actually, if there is sickness, we do have to put people into place to cover that sickness. And the same with a lot of the other types of provision we have with facilities management in schools as well. There's not an option, we're a needs-led service.
And if you don't mind, David, I'm going to ask Michael and Mr. Roach to come in as well. Michael.
Thank you, convener. Just to pick up the question, the comment about the consortium travel. In respect of our budget monitoring, we've identified the level of overspend there, but we are working to bring that back in line. And so during this academic session, we've looked again at the start of the year, which was obviously a midway point through the financial year, and we've agreed that, for example, if a young person who attends secondary school A is starting a day at a different secondary school to have a lesson in a particular subject, then they make their own way there using their travel passes. But if they then need to get themselves back to their home school for the rest of the day, and it's during the day, then we would provide the transport. Equally, if they end the day at a school that isn't their own, they then make their own way home. And we've had several meetings with the high schools to ensure that that is actually what has been happening. And we're also exploring again the use of technology and virtual teaching to look at ways of limiting travel. There are particular subjects, the practical sciences, for example, where you will physically need to be in that building to carry out your learning, but where there's an option to look at an online approach, that is currently being explored.
David, is that okay?
Yeah. I just think we need to keep a very close eye.
Yeah,
I think there's too many parts of that budget overspending.
Okay, it's a reasonable challenge. I'm going to bring Councillor McPhee, Tommy.
Thank you, Convener. I think the overall reduction in low spend is welcome because I know officers are working hard on it. But do we anticipate any further reductions as we move towards the end of the financial year?
Yeah.
Through you, convener, at the moment, I would say it's probably going to be roughly what's there. There is some ups and there is some downs, as you would expect, but I would expect it to be there or thereabouts of what we've reported. The pluses and the minuses at the moment are balancing out, so at this point in time, I'm happy with that projection that's here.
Okay, thank you.
I'm looking to see if there's any other questions or comments. Can't see anything in the room, and I can't see anything online. Can we read the papers, which does include the environment 2.2? Thank you. Can we move on to education capital programme progress? And I'll ask Eddie to participate. Eddie.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. It's the usual education capital progress report. At this stage of the financial year, we're predominantly carried out the vast majority of our programme over the various school holiday periods, and that's reflected in the expenditure summarising Appendix 1. We have had attendance back for the panel refreshes before the Christmas break, and we've now awarded that contract, and the programme for that's been drawn up completely between now and the end of the financial year after school hours. Other than that, it's just a case of us now looking towards next year's programme, working up a programme work which we're already doing in the background for next summer and beyond. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Eddie. I'll open up to questions. Can't see any in the room. I've got Councillor Wilson on the line. David?
Yeah, my question for Eddie is that how do you manage to come in on budget? And it seems to be happening year after year. Can you explain to us how you manage to do that, Eddie?
So you can be, to be fair, we've got more flexibility to make our own projections as to what we're likely to spend each financial year. And we have actually been rolling a wee bit of the capital forward because there's a limit to what we can actually spend in any one given financial year just for constraints of getting access to schools. So as much as I'd like to spend more in the schools, I think around about £2 million is about as much as we can without considering more significant decant or temporary accommodation. So it's maybe a wee bit easier for me than it is in terms of some of the revenue challenges that we have.
David, is that okay? Does that answer your question?
No, thank you.
I was going to lecture you on the difference between revenue and capital, but I'm sure you're aware of that well for now. Is there any other questions available? No? Anything else online? No? Can we agree the recommendations? Thank you. And can we go to the education update report, as you all know an awful lot in this, and I'll ask Michael to introduce the report. Michael.
So thank you for you can be now. There's a lot in this report, so I'll just signpost a few particular parts of it. We'll obviously have to take any questions at the end on its full content. So just starting 3.1 related to share a very positive outcome about the inspectorate report from Glen Park Children's Centre. This was the last unannounced inspection against the previous framework before it changed just at the end of September. And you'll see that the centre quite deservedly achieved 4 very good ratings in that inspection. So our congratulations goes to Tricia Wiley and the team at Glen Park. There's an update as much as we've got it, although it changes continuously, as you can imagine, at the time of writing. 3.2, there's an update there on education reform, including an update across 3.3 and 3.4 in relation to the National Improvement Framework and ongoing international surveys that are beginning to be implemented across the system. There's a couple of legislative updates at 3.5 and 3.6, and just maybe to note at 3.7 that the Work the West partnership continues. In fact, I was at a meeting this afternoon in Barhead to share the Work the West partnership with the Cabinet Secretary's independent professional advisor, and the funding. We continue to contribute a relatively small amount of funding in respect to what it used to receive from the Scottish Government, and that comes out of the Scottish Equity funding allocation that we have. But we continue to believe that is a partnership that we get a huge amount out of. At 3.8, since the last committee, there was a census statistical release. My time to get that right. And this just gives confirmation of what we gave you at the members' briefing back in November, and lets us see comparators between Inverclyde and the national picture. And I'm sure you'll agree that it's a very positive picture in terms of where we sit against the national average. We have left the attendance statistics for a later report around the attendance strategy. So more of the attendance data is within that report. So just obviously noting the overall outcomes, including exclusion statistics, and also the confirmation there around the teacher numbers in terms of where we were in 2025 in comparison to the previous 2 years. And lastly, at 3.9, we just wanted to continue to keep in everyone's sights the meeting that we had, the first meeting with the Pupil Forum. We confirmed that took place, and as Appendix 1 is the minute of that forum meeting. I'm busy looking at the diary to schedule the next of those meetings with you, and we'll go through the same process again, maybe find a place to host it, and see the views of the young people on some of the topics that they previously wished to discuss. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Michael. I'll open up. I can see Francesca. Francesca, I'll bring you in first.
Thanks very much, Convener, and thanks very much for that report, Michael. That's great. Well done to Glen Park Nursery. That's really good news. And yeah, it was good to see the minutes of the Pupil Forum I was at that meeting myself, but that just reminds me why there are my minutes exist, because it's a really good reminder of the things we discussed. I hope the young people found it was useful, as I know that I did, and it was really good to see the young people from all different establishments working together and sort of sharing ideas and seeing similarities and differences between different schools' approaches. So yeah, be keen to get along to the next one as well. And I'm just thinking it'd be, I know it's the young, it'd be interesting to see the topics that they come up with, because I'm thinking I know there are things that we talk about regularly here at this committee, like attendance and the pull to school. We're talking later on about mobile phone use, but I know the young people come up with the subjects, but it'd be interesting to get some of their views on some of those things that are real regular themes here at this committee. That are, but that was good to see that in the papers. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Francesca. I'm going to bring in Councillor Wilson. David?
Yeah, thank you. I go to 3.8. I think that compliments are due at primary level on our literacy and numeracy percentages. It's obviously the last 3 or 4 years there's been a much greater emphasis on literacy and numeracy, and it's showing itself. I do think there that the national figures, particularly in literacy, are quite shocking. But what I'd like to go on to now to my question at 3.4, international surveys, PISA, TIMSS and PIRLS. You know, they're trying to confuse us here, certainly confuse me. Could I go to the PISA survey? And generally, from a Scottish point of view, for the last sort of certainly decade, we've been running behind England in terms of the PISA results. In some cases, we've been sort of in the early 30s and England's been in the mid-teens. But with regard to the number of secondary schools who agreed to participate, can I ask how many of our secondary schools participated, Michael?
So through you, convener, it's I would need to get that data for you, David. It's not all secondary schools, it's a sampling process, but I'll need to go back and verify, because there are other assessments going on and I don't want to confuse my numbers in between the 3 that are there, but I can bring that back round to you tomorrow or later on this evening.
Yeah, at your leisure. Thank you, Michael. No more questions.
Okay, thank you, David. I can't see any other questions. Can we agree the paper? We'll move on to item 2, which is the review of early years provision in the East End of Europe. Pointing slip. Ruth, you want to introduce, and we've got one here as well.
Yes, thank you. So this paper is looking at the early years provision in Area 2, which is the East End of Greenock. And historically, we always reduce places in nurseries if there's less uptake, just so we can staff our nurseries to meet the need. A desktop exercise has basically shown us that in the East End of Greenock, we have an over provision of council nurseries and early years centres. So we would like to test that desktop exercise, which has led us to the conclusion that we could potentially close one early years facility, and we would like to take that out to consultation. Now, in Inverclyde, when we undertake statutory consultation, prior to that, we always undertake a pre-consultation process. The advantage of that is we can just speak to people, find out the areas that they want us to consider in the consultation process, so that when we take it to the formal consultation, that process is slightly more robust, and we want to reflect people's views. So what we're asking for in this paper is for you to note that there is an over provision in the East End of Greenock, and we as officers are coming to say, actually, we can, fiscally, making good use of the public pound, we would recommend the closure of a facility and proving that we undertake a pre-consultation process prior to coming back to this committee asking for permission to undertake a statutory consultation process.
Okay, thank you. I'll just quickly go to Yvonne. Yvonne, have you got anything you want to add, or have you covered everything?
No, I think that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just quickly go to Yvonne. Yvonne, have you got anything you want to add, or have you covered everything?
Thank you.
Yep, no, Ruth's covered everything.
Thank you. And I'll open up for questions. If there's no questions, can we agree the paper? Thank you. Move to agenda item number 13.
So through you, convener, this report is in essence a further update to committee in relation to the assembly provision within the authority, with a particular focus on primary provision. And there are two consultations here we would wish to propose to committee. The purpose is to seek the formal consultation to establish two new provisions, specialist provisions in the primary sector, one at Kingswell Primary School and the other at St Andrews, and also to seek consultation to change what we would call the constitution for other separate specialist provision across the local authority, and I'll explain more about that. The additional provision is needed because we've got several reports to committee before about the increasing level of need amongst our learners, which does require support from specialist teaching within specialist provision. And although our numbers were increased at St Marlow and the communication and language provision at All Saints for this academic year, it's foreseen that we would require further specialist training spaces in 25-26. We also would like to undertake consultation, as I've said, 1.4 on the constitution of 3 of our provisions. That's All Saints, Stella Maris, and Notre Dame, and what's now called the Cove. At Plainview, when we took that statutory consultation and it was approved, the school didn't have any learners in the provision, and the learners themselves and the families and the wider school community consulted and have now called the Cove. The need to look at the consultation around the constitution is because the criteria that's defined by the SNCT for moderate difficulties rather than communication and language difficulties, each of the definitions has with it a requisite staffing ratio. So for the moderate learning difficulties, we would have a different teacher to pupil staffing ratio than communication and language. And the advantage to this approach would be that the teacher staffing ratios for communication and language basis at 1.6 would increase to 1.10, or we will note that we would wish to cap that at 1.8, because we think that would increase the number of places but not put too much of a pressure on the provisions. Part of that's also to reflect the changing needs within these provisions. Plus, the provisions will still cater for pupils who have language communication needs, particularly those young people that is not their only level of need, and there's a wider range of needs attending these provisions. The work that's been done by the service, and this is outlined in section 3, the scoping exercise that we've done indicates that although it's always difficult to be absolutely finite about our projections because we can't always cater for families moving here that we don't know about, but in terms of the number of young people that are within our early years establishments, including our partner providers, who are now ready to go to school and have a level of need that needs to be met within these provisions, that number is not significantly increased on where we were this August, nor is it significantly decreasing. And therefore, in order to meet the numbers that we have for August 26, we cannot accommodate those young people in the existing provisions that we have. There will still be an intake at St Marlow, but we need more provision, and I would argue more localised local provision for our learners. Currently, you'll know yourselves that the specialist provisions are mainly located in Central East End, unit in Port Glasgow, other than the provision that we've opened in the secondary sector over at the Cove in Highview. We don't have the same amount in the Buick area or serving the south of the local authority. So it would give us two provisions that would give a wider geographical spread, would give more options for young people to attend their local schools. And within those provisions, we would seek to ensure that there's clarity that these are provisions where young people may well attend full time. We're having increasing success for example, with the provision of All Saints, where some young people are attending part-time and actually are now ready and able to go back to the mainstream provision or the mainstream school, either full-time or almost full-time basis. And so we utilise these provisions to support that level of need and continue to work with mainstream colleagues in readiness for those young people to make that transition back to the mainstream settings. To be clear, if a young person requires specialist provision for their education, for the entirety of that education, that is what we would provide. But we're having increasing success in using some of the provision almost as intervention, if you like, to support them either to attend the mainstream setting, and that's certainly the model we use at Nest, for example. So within the implication section, we've given an indication at 5.2 that we would adopt a similar approach to the staffing of this, and that we would pivot the resource that we have, the teaching staff, the resource we have from within the core. Did that very successfully for this academic year, and we would do the same thing again. The capital implications of opening these provisions are nothing on the level that we were. Eddie will be pleased to hear when we move this at Craigmarlock, where we had the biggest piece of work to do. And obviously there's a transport indication there of the impact that would have on the cost, although that is something that we still need to work through as we become clearer on which young person is attending which provision and whether or not they would require that level of transport. I think I've covered, hopefully, everything, but obviously I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Michael. Very comprehensive. I'll bring Natasha in first and then Pam. Natasha.
Yep. Mine is just to get it crystal clear in my head. So it sounds like this is the move that will allow more young people to be supported. So just to say, like, the level of need has changed, and the type of needs have changed in our local area. So this proposal will allow us to support more children, young people in a more appropriate way. Because from what I've read at the beginning of this paper, 1 to 6 is a ratio based on very specific needs, whereas we've got a widening type of need. Is that correct? So more young people will actually get the help that they need in the way that they need it. Is that correct, the way that I'm reading this?
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
There's a level of need that through a very thorough process of assessment, ongoing assessment, and a process which we call contextualised assessment, where professionals have been looking at the children who have been referred through to the ASN forum, we could see a level of need that would be best met within specialist provision. Now, obviously, some of that is highly specialised at Craigmarlock. And then there's a higher level of need that's more complex, potentially more complex medical needs that need to be met, and then a different level of need that can be met within a specialist setting, and it's the number of children that require that we are finding that are increasing. I cannot sit here and tell you that this will now be us, that this will be sufficient. My hope is that we're not seeing the same need for secondary increasing at this stage, but it's very difficult to scope this through. The team are actually now engaging with health colleagues in particular to look at the cohort within Inverclyde from birth to 2 to 3, where we may not yet be attending an education setting, to try and scope further what that level of need looks like, and whether or not we see a commensurate drop in the numbers as the years progress. I don't know, but at the moment, in terms of what we can see, we feel that this would give us hopefully sufficiency and for the future.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. The reason why I asked for that clarity is just because I'm aware that for some people they might be concerned by this change that will like decrease or increase the ratio. But actually, if that's going to help our young people better, then it's right that we're doing that, and understand that you don't have a crystal ball. And hopefully, based on what you said about the success at All Saints, what we want is to encourage our children, young people to live their best life. So if there is support that we can put in at the beginning of their journey with us in education, then hopefully that'll set them up well for high school and adult life.
And further to that, for you, Convener, I think the part-time approach, if it's appropriate for the young person, I must emphasise that because it may not be, but if it is, it's allowing that young person to attend their local community school at the same time as attending a provision but it's the work that goes on between the mainstream school and the specialist provision to create that plan to meet the level of need, communication and support. For example, staff at Nest, they don't have children in the setting on a Wednesday, which allows them to go out in a sort of outreach capacity and work to support the mainstream setting. So that model is allowing us effectively to meet more young people. If a young person is a full-time place, that's what we would recommend.
That's great, thank you. Thanks, Camilla, thanks. Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Camilla, and thanks, Michael, for the report. I think in your introduction, you probably answered really the bulk of my questions, or the direction of my questions. You stressed increasing levels of need, and you also said that this is a further update. And I think, you know, really, I'm keen that this report is not seen as a standalone report. I mean, for example, there are no background papers noted, but I think it's important to see this as part of our ASN strategy. And in fact, there have been, you know, many developments that predate this report. It's absolutely the right thing to do. I'm not questioning that at all, but I think it is important that this committee, we see it as you know, part of the strategy, the developing strategy, and that families, children and parents see it in that kind of way. It's an ongoing achievement of our strategy, I think. Thank you.
Anyone want to comment?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a very helpful question, because it allows me to segue to the point you're making. You'll know that within the service improvement plan for this year, we had committed to developing an ASN strategy. We've brought in additional capacity to the central team to be able to achieve that, and Barry Steele, our Education Officer for Inclusion, is currently working on that strategy piece. So that will be multi-layered in its own right, but it will be aligned with our children's service planning and family wellbeing. You're absolutely right. This is a very specific report about the provision. One of the things that we're looking at is really developing again and pushing further on quality first, inclusive learning and teaching in a universal offer, and how do we as a service support schools to develop that as our first our first wave of ensuring that children's needs are met, and then using that gradated response through to looking at then a further level of enhancement from, for example, our ICOS team, our EAL team, going into mainstream settings to support needs, through to the point at which we determine that the young person may well require specialist provision. So no, you're absolutely right, and our aim is to bring that ASN strategy that we should put pressure on Barry, but is to bring that to you for the May committee.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Michael.
All for any comment?
Thanks, Convener. Michael, can I commend you for bringing this proposal forward? I think it's an excellent idea. It's an excellent idea that we've proposed to have that moderate additional support needs there when you get the right level of support. A good teacher-pupil ratio there within the correct environment is very, very important. Will benefit the mainstream as well, so I think it's a win-win all around. Understandable if it's just primary one, that will move on, is that correct? So, no, well done on that, and I think there'll be benefits all along the line. So, for pupils, teachers, results, everything, so thank you.
I'll let Michael comment on.
Yeah, so what we will have in August 2026 in the provisions is just a final one cohort, and that will then grow to the same approach we've taken at Clyde New. In essence, the pupils across P2 to 6 are in either provisions like All Saints or the mainstream schools having their needs met. The difference is, if you go back over time, the numbers have increased coming through. So yeah, it'll be a primary one cohort that will eventually grow, and the provisions will then meet the needs across the P1 to 7 cohort of young people across composite classes, if you like. So, for example, at the base just now in All Saints, although that's increased its number of classes, there are 5 classes, and they're all composite classes, like P1 and P2 composite class. There's a specific reference to the 6 pupils in that.
If there's no other questions, can we agree the recommendations, 2 major recommendations at 2.1? Okay, thank you for that. Can we move on to agenda item number 14, something we've talked about Michael, it's the use of guidance on the use of digital devices in education.
So yes, through you, convener, yeah, very, very current, very, dare I say, hot topic. You've been getting ready this morning. I was listening to proposals from the UK government about consulting on social media bans. So it's a very live and pressing matter for us all. And we decided as a service to work with our school leaders on this piece of guidance regarding digital devices, and I'm pleased to say digital devices and not fall into the trap of talking about mobile phones, because as I'll explain in a minute, there's a rationale for why we said digital devices and not phones. Prior to this guidance, there has been a lot of work in the schools on this, particularly in the secondary sector. And in fact, I would say some of the work in the secondaries is sector leading in terms of the approach they've taken to looking at this with the school communities. There is, as you'll see in 1.3 in August 2024, there was Scottish Government guidance on this matter. And to be clear, that guidance allows school leaders to take individual decisions with their school community about what they do. In essence, so does our guidance. And a short life working group was pulled together to essentially pull together the guidance that we've got, and that included my colleague on the call, Paul McEwen. Basically, in section 3, we cite the national guidance that sits there, and we also point to refer to some of the research and policy that sits behind that. And obviously, in relation to the previous question, the PISA study goes beyond just obviously literacy and numeracy. And within that, young people's views were canvassed about the impact of mobile phones, and they themselves have concerns. And certainly in our consultation with young people, they did raise those concerns. And in establishments that have taken an approach to limiting the use, short of banning the use of mobile phones in schools, they can see the benefits of that themselves. So with 3.3, what we've done is convene a working group. We've looked at Scottish guidance, we've looked at other local authorities' approaches to this, and the working group concluded that the approach would be the guidance within Appendix 1 that you can see there. A draft version of that has been shared with all heads of establishment. It has also been shared with the chairs of parent councils, and it was also shared with the pupil representatives that meet with us on a regular basis. And this was the sole topic of our last meeting with them before the Christmas break. And we've had very positive feedback on the guidance. Within the guidance, I'm quite clear that if a full ban was what a school wished to do, there is nothing necessarily stopping them from doing that. However, what schools have recognised is that by working with young people and families on a consultative basis, mobile phones could still feature within their daily life at school. So for example, if there was a learning activity that required some kind of online access to something, our challenge in Inverclyde is we do not have a per pupil device strategy. So for many of our schools, other than the IT that they do have, sometimes a mobile phone device is a quick way of getting young people to whatever it is that's part of the learning. Having said that, where this has been really successful, particularly across the BGE, the S1 to S3 year groups, there really is, there are no mobile phones. The pupils will still have a phone in their bag, but they are not allowed to take it out, and only if the teacher requests them to do so. And there are strategies in place for what happens if they do. Quick anecdote to one of the schools: if you are caught with a mobile phone, which sits against the policy of the school, the phone is essentially confiscated and it's put in a locked bag, which some authorities or some schools have put in, where everyone has to do that at the start of the day, and that's held basically at the school office, and you get that back at the end of the day. And that was how I went to said school in and around their prelim diet, and the head teacher very eagerly eyed spotted a pupil with what she thought was a mobile phone device and went to confiscate it, and the pupil quickly corrected her, saying, "Sorry, teacher, this is actually my calculator, I've just come out of my National Applied Maths exam, so could I please be excused?" And we moved on. So I think hopefully the guidance is clear enough. We have made recommendations at section 8, and it's in primary and early years, obviously. It really isn't an issue, but in primary schools we tend to have a situation where phones are handed to the teacher anyway. That's long been the practice. Certainly even when I was teaching, which wasn't yesterday, that was the practice, and much easier to control when you're in the same room with the same teacher all day long. And in the secondary, we're recommending that the digital devices should be switched off out of sight. And as I've explained, schools have got ways of ensuring that is what happens. And just a couple of points to be clear, if there were exceptional medical circumstances which were understood, for example, phone apps linked to diabetic young people, that would obviously sit outside this guidance. And the reason we're calling this digital devices is because it's to future-proof. This technology is changing exponentially, and mobile phones or watches with phone connectivity now, recording in scenarios, are becoming an increasing issue. So what this does is it's covering all options, including mobile phones. I'm just going to ask my colleague Paula, I have to thank her for supporting us with this, because she was a key part of this piece of work. I don't know if Paula wants to add anything as one of the architects of the guidance. Paula?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I suppose to come in from the staff point of view, there is protection for staff built in. We have had instances where young people have recorded and then manipulated recordings of staff and pupils and have posted those on social media sites. So there's now a level of protection in there that signing that responsibility agreement means that that shouldn't happen. We know it still will. You know, we're not naive enough to know that this is an absolute guarantee of protection, but it absolutely builds in a level of protection for staff, for all staff and for pupils, by having these recommendations for our young people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paula. I'm going to bring Tommy in first, and then Francesca. Tommy.
Thanks, Convener. Michael, just correct for all, the Scottish Government have given us the council guidance, which we are then sent on to the school. So is it up to the school to formulate their own policy? So we could, for example, 6 secondary schools, we could have 6 slightly different policies, or is there a uniformity or discussions take place so that Mr. Smith up in that school, let's do something I can't do in that school. So where are we on that?
So through you can be there. So basically, our guidance builds upon the guidance that is there nationally, but ultimately it's for each establishment now to utilise this guidance from us as to what they determine for their school and their school community. There may well be some degree of contextual difference as to why they may have a different approach. However, I would emphasise that we, as part of the Short Life Working Group, almost all the secondaries were represented, and we have discussed this, not as a standing agenda item at our secondary heads meeting, but we have certainly shared the practice. One of the things that the young people talked about was going back to the consortium discussion, that, you know, somebody had said, well, you know, there may be a different approach in one school where I attend full time to a school that I go to for the week. But they then acknowledged that that's already the case in terms of the school's behaviour policies, for example. So young people are used to the difference, but what we're trying to get is a degree of consistency. And I would say the working group has actually shown that they're all very much in alignment. There's not going to be radical differences. But should a secondary school wish to do something different to others, there's nothing to stop them from doing that, as long as it sits within the guidance. And what the guidance seeks to do, and there's an appendix there that gives them tools with which to consult with the community. And I think that's a really important part of the schools where it's been most successful, I would say. They have had a really good period of consultation with young people, the families, staff, as Paula mentioned, prior to and during the implementation process. And that's taken everybody with them.
Okay, thank you.
Francesca.
Thanks.
And then I'll bring Ian in online.
Thanks very much. Thanks for talking us through it all, Michael, so extensively, and good to get all that background. So I think this is a really good starting point, and it sounds, which is the way that I see it, and you're possibly, you know, thinking it's getting towards the end. So I think it's really good that that working group was there, and as you say, we lots of us around the table are parents or grandparents or know young people, so we know from our own experience, some of the approaches that different schools have taken, that consultation and the approaches that they take. So I think it's really good to get this guidance here. I have to say that I was disappointed that the Scottish Government brought out guidance on it, because obviously, you know, it is semantics, but sometimes things are guidance, sometimes things are instruction. And it can feel at times like guidance from Scottish Government is potentially passing the buck to individual schools or individual areas to take what will probably be quite challenging and difficult decisions for schools and educators, because schools don't exist in a vacuum in society. You know, there's lots of things that are there as a reflection. We know ourselves, lots of us have got our mobile phones with us regularly, and we've ended up in a sort of situation where young people, you know, because this guidance is coming out from Scottish Government in 2024, you know, the arguments, the pros and cons of social media or mobile phones or devices are well rehearsed. So we know all them and we don't need to go into that here, but we have ended up in a situation in 2024 where the norm will be for young people to have their devices with them in school in whatever way. So I think this guidance that's going out here, and as you say, it's not standing alone, it's there in a sort of environment where those conversations are kept going regularly with yourselves and the school leaders. Because I think, you know, Appendix 1 as part of it sets out, you know, why limit mobile device use, and you've got some reasons there that we all, I think, would accept. It's very understandable, and as you see, young people are now more and more accepting it as well. And I know I've said this to you before, that I've spoken to some young people and teachers in schools and other authorities as well outside of Inverclyde, and they are seeing really big improvements where they've got a strong kind of decisive approach on this, that they're saying teachers are reporting that, you know, young people are greeting them in the morning, that there are lots more sort of like ad hoc conversations going on between young people and staff. There's less of the kind of toilet meetups that might have happened post-COVID. It's not, you know, spread across Scotland that people are organising. There's just a kind of sort of safer, calmer environment in schools. So I'm really pleased that we've got this guidance. But I think I would also be eager to, I think a question from me would be, what did the schools feel? Were they right behind the guidance? Or was there a sense ever that they were wanting something stronger from Scottish Government? That was saying, I know you used the word ban, and I don't like the term ban, but I think it's the only way to describe it. And then also, I think it would be good to see this as a really good starting point and get a future report on how it's going and the consistencies and it being implemented across different schools, just so that I think, you know, as Councillor McVeigh is saying, we're not seeing schools going off differently with it, and that there is, you know, a really strong degree of consistency between them and their approaches. Thanks very much. Thank you.
So through you, Convener, I mean, I suppose all policy and guidance is a starting point, and what I would refer you to is 3.3, where the schools have written this guidance with us.
Yeah.
So it's not been written without school leaders at the table. And I would say that where we have examples of, and there is to some extent that every school in Inverclyde has got an approach to this. And what this tried to capture was the maybe the best practice, the practice more evolved. And in the schools where that's the case, exactly what you described is what we've got evidence from in Inverclyde. So if you wish me to arrange a visit to the school I'm thinking of, I'm happy to do that, and you can get a sense of what you described in an Inverclyde school. Within the guidance at point 3, the period of review is there. So it is, we've said, we recommend it as a 2-year cycle of review. So at the very least, we will be bringing this back to you in 2 years' time, but we recognise that, as I've indicated earlier, the technology could evolve rapidly in the next 2 years. We will also have external inspection evidence to reflect upon, and I will internal review quality students' procedures. So I suppose if we felt that there was a need to do something different, that's what we would do. But it will formally come back to you in 2 years' time.
So, can I bring Ian?
Thanks, Convener, and thank you, Michael, for a very comprehensive report and a modern day problem, without a doubt, and definitely a big issue for the schools to address and how they address it through all the definite protocols. I just recently read that mobile devices and phones were compared to be what you'd call a fruit machine, and so much we can't argue with that they are addictive and they just hold the person to all the social media apps. So the question that I would want to add, and I don't think the report, but maybe some that could be brought in if it was thought worthy, would be to explain to the users of the digital devices to what extent does prolonged exposure to rapid reward digital mobile devices during school years contribute to other difficulties with attention, anxiety, and cognitive fatigue in later life. So it'd be very useful to present the reasons for not, but I think pupils and even others in society need to see the long-term effects it has, and I just wonder if that could be built into the learning module. Thanks.
Michael, do you want to be able to answer that at the present time?
Well, I mean, I think sort of the research evidence of the impact is not within my sphere of influence, or I think increasingly there are varying reports coming through from various health researchers about the potential impact of this, and I think there is some research that the group did take a look at. I mean, certainly what we've found in schools that have taken an approach to restricting the use of phones has been that opportunity for young people to reflect on the benefits that they see that correlate with what Councillor Brennan referred to. They can recognise, and they've articulated that back to Ruth and myself in consultation meetings, they recognise that if their phones aren't out, they're more likely to engage in a conversation, and they're being supported by school staff to reflect on the health benefits. I think there's a wider societal issue. Councillor Helen, where we all need to, sometimes when I see my Monday morning update on my screen use last week, I shudder, and I try and see what I can do to bring it down the following week. But I certainly know that within the curriculum, within the PSE and within health curriculums within schools, there are definitely opportunities, for this to be discussed and reflected upon with young people.
Is that okay?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I think just adding to that, when you take it forward into when they move into a place of employment, if they become disciplined that they don't need to have their phone, then they become a better prospect for work as well. So thanks, Michael.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, thanks, Camilla. I think I do have to come back on Councillor Bennan's comments. I don't think it's honestly fair to characterise the Scottish Government as passing the buck on this one. I think we've already identified that our schools are all different, and if they had come in with something that was very instructive and very prescriptive and restrictive, then there would be equal criticism that they were being centrally controlling, and that this would not be helpful in helping schools to do what they need to do on a daily basis. We've said our schools are different. This allows general parameters where they can express what's going to be right for their young people and their staff. And if it was prescriptive and if it was instructive, then there would be no room for the engagement that Michael's just spoken about with the young people to help be active participants in what's going to make things better for them. So I felt I needed to come back on that comment there. I don't think that's fair.
And I do realise how difficult it is to legislate things like this.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring the different up in.
I'm just wondering, part of this, I don't think this is very good, and today I was listening to a piece about the initial reports from Australia about the banning of social media content for under 16s, and one of the things he said that the young people always found ways around it, which was quite amusing to me. But I wonder what your plans to communicate what they get. I know you're saying every school will be different, but you're giving these guidelines out from the council to communicate these what the proposals are being to parents, because at the end of the day it's the parents who are buying the tech for the children. I was quite taken aback recently of a primary 4 pupil in one of the primary schools with wearable tech able to record what's going on in the lesson, and that's an issue. So if the parents need to have a responsibility here as well, how do you engage? How are you planning to engage with that?
So through you, Convener, I mean, good practice in any terms of any policy development in a school or early age establishment is about parent consultation. And I think the guidance does give clarification or advice about how to do that. And in some of the appendices there are even questions to sort of frame those conversations. So where this has been most effective and this guidance is built upon that, the parent body have been involved in a, I would say, a meaningful way alongside pupils about the guidance as it's being drafted. So it hasn't been, we've written this, here you are. They've been involved in the process of writing it, and including obviously communication with their parent councils. And we've certainly had this in front of our parent council chairs group on a regular basis as it's been evolving, including having sent a draft version of this to them for their thoughts.
Okay. I'm going to bring Natasha in, and then I'm going to bring Paula in. Natasha.
Yeah, sorry, I was coming along with it to ask the questions, but I'll ask the few that I think are most pertinent right now. Just regarding what Reverend Burt said there about the Australian social media ban for under 16s, they get round it by line about their age. And ultimately, the parents will know that their children are using these websites because their child will be using it in their home and sending pictures and showing pictures of them and their friends. Following on from that, in Appendix 1, it does say regarding mobile device use and digital media. So my first question just around, there's a whole list of different mobile devices. I would say like a portable gaming device could be from an old Nintendo DS, which is quite analog and not connected to the internet, all the way to somebody having a smartwatch which helps them track their steps for their health if they're, you know, trying to get their steps up and things like that. So I'll be saying that there will be an outright ban against all digital devices. I suspect it's not, and that it depends school to school. And secondly, when it says digital media, there is a question under the people agreement checklist around not sharing, uploading and manipulating images or recordings. But should we be going further with this and saying that no social media should be used, that is not age appropriate? So like, for example, if a social media site says under 13 shouldn't be using it, that if a child under the age of 13 is using that, that would not be deemed appropriate exposure for that child to have access to that. So should we be putting something in here about access to social media where young people or children are accessing it under the legal age requirement? Right, I know that's a bit of an ad hoc question, but it is linked to this digital media.
I think there are two questions there. This is about a set of guidelines to support schools to develop policy around digital devices.
Mm-hmm.
This is not about us stating what we think parents should be doing in relation to what their children have access to at home.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
And when I was a head teacher, it was a regular occurrence. I remember once phoning a parent to discuss with them inappropriate things that the child in P6 would have been put on their feet. They don't have Facebook. They do. I'm looking at. I've got a hard copy of it here. So I don't think we can enforce that, and that's a national issue because, as you know, there's currently there are workarounds to young people right across the planet being able to access platforms that are not appropriate for their age. So that's not what this agreement is about. This is about the digital devices that they will bring into school. When that device goes home, I don't believe we have any notice as to what we can say should or shouldn't be on that phone.
Yeah, sorry, maybe it wasn't clear. I wasn't meaning for use outside school because we can't control what parents do or don't decide to expose their children to, as long as it's safe for them. It's just because we've got that bit saying about not sharing, uploading, manipulating images, which I understand why it protects other pupils and it protects our staff members as well and other parents. It's more around that social media use related to school. So we've all seen videos of fights that have broken out and things like that. Is there something that we need to put in here where it's just generic sharing? Because that's what leads to cyberbullying things, or is that out with the scope of this? Is this just purely about the devices and no other part of it? It's just that first point kind of opens it up a bit wider, I think, to the digital media bit.
I think what
I'm happy to take this offline if that's
it might be nice to take it offline. I see Paula's hand up. I don't know as part of the working group whether they discuss this or not, but certainly what that refers to is a young person who has not complied with the policy of the school, has then taken what the recording is and they, or even their family, may have uploaded that to a social platform. I don't think we can go beyond that and say that you, I mean, certainly as a head teacher, on many occasions, I tried to one-to-one educate a parent as to did you realise that? Oh no, I didn't. Or it was part of my weekly newsletter to parents to remind them of the fact that it's still happening.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Sorry for going a bit adjacent to that, but thanks.
I'm going to bring Paul in first and then Fiona in to give us the parents' perspective as well. Paul?
Thanks, convener. I'll pick that point up first. The working group didn't consider social media, or it is purely around the use of devices in and around school and the school grounds, which might cover that sort of recording. If there's a fight going on, it's part of the guidance for schools when they're producing their own policy is to consider the scope of the policy and how far-reaching it is in terms of the school building and the school grounds. But actually I was coming in on Councillor Hellier's point. In section 4 of the paper, there is a link to Inner Drive. One of our head teachers on the working group had specifically asked that we include research. So there's research on there around the negative impacts of, I think it's mobile phone use, but that can be extended out to digital devices. So it's actually in there as part of the policy already. Thanks.
Thanks, Paula. Fiona?
Hi, I guess I just wanted to make the point that I'm completely on board with everything that's been proposed, but I guess ultimately from my point of view, with kids between primary school and high school ages, there is a kind of reliance on the delivery of education in certain subjects and so forth that do lean on homework apps and so forth, where we have no objections and it makes for an accessible life within and out with school hours. But beyond that, just considering the narrative that is how much kids are exposed to digital devices, and the fact that we have to finally balance how it impacts them in their growth and their education experience, but also prepare them for a life that does rely on these digital devices post-education. So I just kind of wanted to kind of highlight that longer term view that does extend beyond the school years, and having that sense of, you know, as a parent, we have to prepare for a world of work or a world of higher or extended education that won't have these regulations in place, and we don't want to create an ignorance to their impact when it comes to the kids that are using them, and just kind of place that point that I think we need to be, you know, pragmatic and open-minded about it as well.
Thanks for that, Fiona. I'm going to bring in, I think, Paul, I think you've got a legacy hand there. I'm going to bring in Councillor Berley again. Ian, you want to comment?
Just quickly, no, it was just a thank you. I think it was very necessary for me to thank Paula just for bringing that forward. That was all. Thanks very much.
No problem, Ian. I'm going to let Michael back in again to probably round up the discussion.
I think that just the final point I would make is that on the flip side of this, we do need to remember that actually technology can be hugely advantageous. And we had a presentation at Head Teacher Meetings last week from an organisation called Kooth, who provide online support for mental health through online mechanisms, and it's being cited as part of almost that tier 1, and they had the evidence of Inverclyde pupils engaging with that funded resource. And I think having listened to the views of an outright social media ban in Australia, I think actually the longer that's in place, the flip side of that is it's inadvertently maybe cutting some young people off who lead very isolated lives, and their only way of contacting one another or existing socially is in a digital world, and that has cut that off for some of them, and that's had commensurate negative impact. So I think that's why we've taken a balanced and pragmatic view, although this is really about digital devices as opposed to social media.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I'm just going to wind up. The only thing I would say, if I was a head teacher, I'd be confiscating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 devices. Well, even more so, because people have got 2 phones. But I'm glad I've not. But no, thanks very much. Hope it was a good discussion. I do realise that there is different views on how prohibitive we should be doing with mobile devices. But I think what Michael said is one of the key things. We know it's a constant moving feast in this, and Michael says this will be under review in 2 years' time. So I think we take that on board, and we see that at least we've got guidance that the kid gets their skills. And can I ask you to hear the paper?
Agree.
Thank you. And can I move on to the next agenda item, which again is something that we've discussed many a time at this committee, and it's a attendance strategy for 2025, 2027. Michael.
So through you, Kevin, you'll be fed up listening to me. I'm going to try and bring in Fiona Walker in a minute, my colleague, but I'll just introduce the paper to you. So we previously brought you an attendance strategy back 18 months ago, and the world of attendance has moved on considerably for us. We have seen improvements across the board. We also now have Fiona seconded from her team post at Inverclyde Academy, hugely because of this fantastic work and the improvements that we've seen in that school. And on coming into post in August, Fiona has gone about her business thoroughly and diligently, and part of the process of her review and work and having that additional capacity in our team was to recognise that the digital strategy we had needed to be upgraded, up-levelled, and also the guidance and advice that we had around us had significantly moved on. So we've therefore decided to sort of almost rewrite the strategy that now reflects far better the data that we have. And I have to say, to Fiona's credit, I don't think we've ever known our attendance data as deeply as we now do, literally to the individual pupil. And a large part of that work has been going out into the establishments to ensure that they are progressing and have a policy in line with our policy, in line with Scottish Government policy, and that, for example, the use of attendance coding is highly accurate across all of our establishments. There's been a lot of CLPL and input, so continual professional learning for staff within that regard. We can see that in 24-25, and this is outlined at the beginning of the strategy, we've seen an overall improvement in our data. However, I think as we continue to improve our coding, we're probably now, as we sit here, a really very accurate picture of the attendance data picture, because the coding allows us to be absolutely sharp now on exactly the reasons for non-attendance, for example. The final thing I'll say before I bring Fiona in to say a few words is that what we've also tried to do is reflect some strategic work that is ongoing, has always been there, but across the partnership with our colleagues in children's services, so that we know that attendance or non-attendance is a symptom, and there's a backstory for each child and family as to why the young person is having challenges attending school. And so the strategy tries to think through and put plans in place to evolve understanding that and what we can do with partners to support families to ensure that people attend school more frequently. I'm going to introduce Fiona now and ask her to say a few words.
Thank you. So through you, convener, it's just to say that this strategy and the work that we've been doing is very much about a collaborative approach. It's about bringing together all of the agencies that we've got in Inverclyde to make sure that we can drive attendance forward. We are currently slightly behind where we were at this same point last year. That is down to a variety of different factors, including what was in the news just before Christmas about the flu, and that had an impact on our attendance data. But we are still in line with national averages, and we are still trying to progress that particular focus on reducing those pupils that are persistently absent from school and making sure we've got effective support in for those severely absent from school.
Thank you very much, Fiona. I was going to say, those of us of a certain age in Inverclyde will remember a guy called Reggie. I'm not going to say that you're a good Reggie, but I think that the data-driven and the very fact that you know so many people and can drive that down can only be good for the pupils in Inverclyde. So I'm just going to open up for questions now. I've got Francesca.
Thanks very much. No, it was just to say a thanks for all the work that continues to go on around attendance. It's great to have Fiona on board then as a lead in attendance, because that can hopefully only mean better things for us. And I know it's been something that's really been focused on by Michael and other teams as well anyway. So it's really important, I think, to lots of us in the committee that young people make it to school so that they've got the best outcomes once they get there. So that's great to see it. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Francesca. Any other? Oh, sorry. Sorry, and it's, I must have
Just said you had
violators. Apologies, it must have been a blind spot.
Right, yeah, I mean, I think you know what's been done is really great. But reading through this, seeing 3.6, that continues to an increasing percentage of families taking a term time holiday, an increase from attendance was impacted 2023, 24, 24, 25. The assumption it says here is that it's been driven by the cost of living crisis and the significant difference between travel costs during term time and school holiday periods. The fact that it says assumption, I don't think that's good. I think we should know what's going on a bit better to start with. And bearing in mind that education is a parent's responsibility, and that people going on holiday and travelling and things can actually be educational. So as a council, can we not work more with parents, know what they're doing, and find out what education the children are getting, where they're going, the holidays, wherever they go. And almost have that as a combined sort of education fulfillment type thing. And I don't know if that could be counted towards education as well, you know. So I think we could be doing good things here, you know, even though the parents are taking the children off. And I know I've done this myself with my daughter was young. You know, I took her on holiday to a family wedding in Canada during term time. I took her out, got her to come out to France when I was working in Grenoble, and I arranged for her to go in for a day in a French school, which I think was educational, and she got to canoe in the Ardèche River. You know, so there's lots of educational things that can be done when people are on holiday and should really count towards their education.
I'll kind of put down a bit of a comment on that.
So we do know from the statistics, because we had an FOI on this from one of the newspapers about where we would sit against national comparators for the week before a holiday. And the FOI was taken the week before the Easter holidays, and unauthorised absences. And Inverclyde at that time was one of the worst in Scotland. Was one of the worst. Poorest attendance. So we do know that in Inverclyde we have a tendency for people to take holidays out with the school holiday period. Right. Now, bottom line is, during the term time, children should be in school. So there are exceptional circumstances that would be, for instance, parental employment, where we can give authorised holidays. But when the paper says the assumption is it's linked to the cost of holidays, then I think what we're saying is we see a significant difference between the cost of taking somebody on holiday during holiday times and the week beforehand. Sure. And we suspect that Inverclyde, because of the area it's in, the births more deprivation is more. That's more of a trend within Inverclyde. So that's why we're saying that's the assumption. We're not saying that parents can't take their children away if there's a real reason for doing so. But what I would say is during the term time, children should be in school.
I'm sat on the fence in that, you know, as far as, and especially where, you know, if there's a family wedding in Canada or something and people want to go to it, I think it's important that they're able to do that and that children can go to, you know, as a family. So I honestly, I think the council should be working more with parents and know that they're doing these things, you know, not be an assumption anymore, know what they're doing and actually aid the whole thing to happen, rather than just turn around and say, no, you should be in school and that's it, you know, and it's bad if you're not at school.
I'm going to bring Fiona back in, because Fiona is now going to be my guru on this. Fiona?
Through you, convener, we have started working very much closely with the schools and with the parents to find out what they are doing while they're on holiday, and some very few parents have come back with they're actually there for an educational activity and will be getting some educational input. Most of them have just said that that is the time that they could take a holiday, or that was the time that was best for them to go for their families. So we are working very closely with the schools to find out the reasons of why people are going on holiday. But ultimately, we do need to record when they are not at school.
Yeah. Michael, do you want to come back in?
Yes, I just want to be clear, Councillor Wilson, that the assumption is not that they're on holiday. We know they're on holiday. The assumption is the reason for them taking the holiday in term time is to do with the cost of living crisis. Just to be clear, we know where they are. We know they're on holiday. We're not assuming that. Just to be absolutely clear, the assumption that's referred to is the reason for them choosing to take a holiday during the school period. And just, you know, whilst our head teachers and heads of establishment are working with parents, I can't be asking, you know, head teachers to get a full itinerary of someone's holiday and elicit what was an educational activity, and then there's nothing within the legislation that allows to consider, well, we could mark that as attendance for one day because they did something educational. But I don't for 1 minute suggest that in taking that trip there will not be it wouldn't be an experience that would enhance the child's learning overall. But the way that we sit, we know that on holiday that's not the assumption, and we're not able to record what they do during a holiday, nor do we have the capacity to do that against attendance at school.
Thank you. And so you went back in?
Yeah, I was just going to say that even, you know, travelling somewhere is educational, you know, and that builds up a child's confidence to be able to travel.
Okay, I'm going to bring Jim in, and Mr. Proctor.
Jim's fine. I was interested, you said, about the cost difference the week before school ends, because that quite often is the big period. And I know it's a long time ago now, when I used to be called Mr. Docherty, that I dealt with this. But on those occasions where it was dealt with, quite often what was discussed by the parent was the offering in school at that time. So we're looking at it from one side, what's been done on the other side.
Michael.
Well, Fiona, I don't know who went in first. It's like Angus, the fastest finger first. You and Fiona.
I think Fiona
I've had more experience than you, so do you want to go? Do you want to answer that one? Fiona?
I think Fiona's.
Yes, sorry, through you, convener. The pool to school that we've got and the offer that we have, especially in those weeks running up until the holiday, is actually immense in Inverclyde. And even just myself being out and amongst different schools just up to the Christmas period, the offer that we had was absolutely amazing, and the work that was being done in those schools. But we can't sort of mitigate for parents that are making those choices.
Thanks, Jim.
I'd just like to maybe get an idea of what the whole thing is. I mean, is that offering an academic offering, or is it a social offering? Because the parents quite often would pointedly say, we don't find that a useful time in school because there's school shows going on, there's trips going on, and we can provide that kind of like educational experience. The same as is mentioned, we can provide that as well as the schools can.
Michael?
I think it's both. I think the message from me has always been that expectation of continuing the quality of learning. But I think as well as that, there is the social element of it. So a couple of examples, if I might. Again, it's not a new strategy. It was Stevens High School putting in a huge big talent show competition on the last Friday of the term, which did have a commensurate impact on kids still realising was a reason. And if any of you are Traitors fans like myself, we had moved primary, and all the staff were either faithfuls or traitors. If you know the television programme, and each day as they counted down to the final day, they were revealing who the faithfuls were, and it was all set up, and their attendance was very high. Our staff were going all guns blazing to get young people to come to school. That pool to school is what I refer to.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to bring Francesca, and I think Francesca, you might be. Oh, I don't know. Fiona, is that a legacy hand you've got up?
Through you, convener. Yes, sorry, I'll take it down.
Francesca.
Thanks, convener. I just wanted to concur with what Michael's saying there, and Fiona as well, that I've been really impressed. And I think it is that continued focus on attendance. And I suppose it covers some of the discussion we were having earlier on, that even I think, you know, about bringing parents into the process too, because I think I've seen some schools sending out to parents in advance of that final week or that final month kind of an itinerary, to use a word we've been using a lot today, of what's going on in the last months. That enables parents to be able to say to their young people, oh, come on, you do really want to be in on that last day, because if you're not there, you're going to miss, for example, the traitors, or for example, and I suppose, as you know, Mr Docherty, health and wellbeing is a big part of the curriculum, same as, you know, literacy and numeracy, so all the things kind of match in together. So I think I have been really impressed at some of the work that the schools are doing on that, and it is, I think it must, as you say, it is having an impact, and there's evidence to show that. So it is really good. And I know that a talent show is not going to be every young person's cup of tea, but they'll enjoy watching it, and the schools are putting on different offers for different things. Thanks.
Thanks. And I'm going to leave the last word, I think, to Paul.
Thanks, convener. It's just to come in on that Pool to School and the different activities that are happening in those last weeks. There will be curricular focus on those, and there will be curricular links to those. And because it doesn't look academic, doesn't mean it's not learning, and it doesn't mean that assessment isn't ongoing and seeing our young people in different social settings. Our curriculum is about experiences and outcomes. So whether you're part of the talent show or part of the audience, all of that is in our curriculum. And so all of that can be assessed to some degree. So the perception may be that there's nothing happening, but actually from a teacher's point of view, there's lots and lots going on that can be linked to the curriculum and can be assessed. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And I think that's it. Can we agree with paper?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for attending. Appreciate it. The discussion was much appreciated.